this lesson, we're going to work with angles in a coordinate system. So our objective is I can use angles in a coordinate system. So these angles are going to start and go in a circular motion. We're going to define terms. We're going to talk about how we measure those angles. And for this lesson, we're going to talk specifically about angles in degree measure. So first of all, let's talk about our coordinate system. We've got our X and Y axis. Just a reminder that we've got quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4 are the ones that we have used in previous lessons. Now we're going to talk about how we would draw angles in that system. So a standard position for an angle is where we start at the x-axis. That's where our beginning side is going to be, and then we rotate counterclockwise for positive angles. So what that means, what that would look like is we would start our angle right here on the positive x-axis, okay? So let's add here, for the x-axis, we'll start on the positive side. And then we'll rotate the angle counterclockwise. So if we call this angle theta, we rotated up into the positive first quadrant first, then we'd rotate to the second, to the third, and the fourth. So we'd rotate through our quadrants as we've listed those before. Now the initial side is where we start. So this is the starting side for our angle. And our terminal side, makes sense for the word terminal, is our ending side. So let's go ahead and do some examples. Let's start with this one. 230 degrees, if we start with our positive x-axis here as our starting side here, then what we'll do is we'll rotate counterclockwise. If I rotate up here, this is 90 degrees to get to the y-axis. And then as I go past that, I get to 180 degrees as I get back to the x-axis. And then I've got to go past 180 degrees, 50 degrees to get to 230 degrees. So notice, and this will be something we'll talk about in the future, I've gone to 180, and then to get to 230, I've gone 50 degrees past that in order to get to that angle that measures 230. Now what I'd like you to do is pause the video, and I'd like you to try these three and see how you do on them. Now that you've tried them, let's do them together. 120 degrees, again we start with the positive x-axis, and then we measure to 90, and past 90 we'll get here. That's 30 degrees past 90 degrees to get 120 degrees. Notice that we're just 60 degrees short of 180, so that's what our measure is with the x-axis to get to that 120. To get to negative 40, you might have thought, what do you mean by negative? Well, if starting on the positive x-axis is where we start with the initial side, if going counterclockwise is positive, that means going clockwise 40 degrees would be negative 40 degrees. So we would go clockwise to go with the negative angles. Okay, and then lastly, 480, you might say, well, wait a minute, how does that go? Well, let's just keep measuring, let's keep going. So we go to 90, to 180, to 270, to 360. We're going past 360. If we go 90 more degrees past 360, that takes us to we go 90 degrees past 360, we get to 450. And so we keep going, and we've got 30 degrees past that, gives us our 480 degrees, which is the same as what we did with this 120. It gives us the same type of measurement and look as that angle. And what we're going to do is we're going to extend this idea and talk about the fact since these both end in the same place, we're going to call them coterminal angles. So let's take now and let's work with that idea of coterminal angles. A coterminal angle are two angles that share the same terminal side. So that's why they're called coterminal, because they share that same terminal side. Now here's what you want to do is they start and they end in the same place. So once we have that, the way we find them is there's two ideas. If you want to find a coterminal angle, there's first option is to add a multiple of 360 to get another one. So if I have an angle, for instance, if I draw an angle like this, and I have an angle here, like if this is 70 degrees, okay? 70 degrees, if I want to go coterminal to it, all I have to do is take that angle and I'm going to add 360 onto it. 360 added onto that 70 will give me a total of 430 degrees as a coterminal angle to that, to my original 70. So if you want to do a coterminal angle, add a multiple of 360, so you could add 720 or keep adding multiples on, or you could subtract a multiple of 360. So another way to do that with that 70 degrees is if we started with that 70 degrees and we went backwards 360 degrees, and then maybe I kept going and went 360 more degrees to end at the same spot, that's 70 degrees minus 720, which is 2 rotations. So starting at the 70 and rotating backwards 2 rotations. And that would give me, when I would subtract those, I'd get a negative 650 degrees as my coterminal angle with that 70. So add or subtract, that will get you coterminal angles. Let's try an example. So if I ask you here to find a positive and a negative angle that's coterminal with 135, to do the positive, all you have to do is take 135 plus a multiple of 360, 360, 720, 1080, add that on. I'm going to just do the first one and add 360 onto it. And if you add 360 onto it, you get 495. So there's a coterminal angle. It ends in the same place as 135. If I want a negative value, I would subtract 360. And if I take 135 minus 360, I get negative 225. So that rotation, if I go negative 225, would end in the same places as 135 would. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause the video, and I'd like you to try these two. Come up with a positive and a negative value that's coterminal with these. Now that you've tried it, let's do it together. I'm going to stick on this first one with adding 360 and subtracting 360. So negative 110 plus 360 would give me a positive value of 250 degrees. Just separate these here. So that would be coterminal positive. And if I wanted another negative, that would be coterminal with it. If I take negative 110 and subtract 360, that would have me end at negative 470. And there I have two angles. Now for this last one, 700, in order to get to a positive, all I have to do is add a 360. So I'm going to take 700 and add 360, and that gets me to 1060 degrees. So that's a positive value that's coterminal with it. But if I want to go negative, 700, I can't just subtract 360 to get to a negative. I've got to go further. I've got to subtract at least 2 rotations, which would mean a multiple of 360 would be 720. If I subtract 720 from 700, I get negative 20 degrees. So that's the way you find coterminal angles, and using angles in a coordinate system.